The prince's face was painted red, and his eyes were blank. I'll never forget how he moved, like his bones didn't belong to him anymore. The sound of the drums followed him everywhere. Even in the silence of the forest, I could hear them, low and steady, beating in my chest. That's when I realized I wasn't running from him. I was running from what he had become. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a small village near the hills. Life was simple, quiet. Until the prince came. Prince Kwame was the king's youngest son, known for his cruelty. He would ride into villages with his guards, taking what he wanted. Cattle, food, even people. We didn't matter to him. We were like ants under his feet. One year, during the dry season, a woman from our village went to him. Her name was Amara, and she was the best healer anyone knew. She asked the prince for grain to feed the children and promised to heal his sick horse in return. She was desperate, but she didn't understand who she was dealing with. The prince agreed, but after the horse was healed, he laughed in her face. He took her grain and ordered his guards to beat her for daring to bargain with him. Amara returned to the village with broken ribs and empty hands. That night, she sat by the river, mixing herbs and muttering words we didn't understand. A week later, the prince fell ill. His skin turned pale, then his body burned with fever. None of his royal healers could save him. The king called for Amara, promising her riches if she cured his son. She didn't go. She only said, "The drums have chosen him." We didn't know what that meant. At first, the prince didn't die. Instead, he got worse. His eyes changed, turning dull and lifeless. He started wandering the palace at night, muttering strange words. People said they heard drumming wherever he went. Deep, rhythmic drumming that came from nowhere. The palace servants began to disappear. One night, the prince came back to our village. He walked barefoot, his guards trailing behind him, just as lifeless as he was. He said he was looking for Amara. I'll never forget how he looked, his mouth twisted into a smile that wasn't his own, his head twitching like he was listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. The drums were louder now, like they were coming from the earth itself. Amara stood in the center of the village, waiting for him. She wasn't afraid. She held out her hands and said, "It's not me you want. It's them." The prince's guards attacked us. They didn't move like men, they moved like animals, fast and brutal. I ran into the forest with a few others, but we could still hear the drums. They were everywhere, echoing through the trees. We hid until sunrise, but when we returned, the village was gone. Burned to the ground. There was no sign of Amara, the prince, or his guards. Just the ashes and the sound of the wind. Some say Amara cursed the prince to become a vessel for the spirits he'd angered. Others say the drums were calling him back to where he belonged, back to the earth. All I know is this: sometimes, late at night, when the wind is still, I hear the drums. Faint and steady. And I pray they aren't coming for me.